Every man remembers the moment, even if he doesn't recognize it at the time. A moment so small, so quiet, so deceptively gentle that it slips right past your awareness. But it changes everything. It's the moment you look into her eyes, and without realizing it, you give up a piece of yourself. Not your love, not your heart, but your self-respect. Maybe it was the moment you let something slide that you knew wasn't right. Maybe it was when you said, "It's okay," even though it cut you deeply. Maybe it was when you swallowed your voice because you were afraid she'd walk away. And in that single instant, that tiny fracture in your integrity, she saw something you didn't want her to see. A man willing to betray himself to keep someone else. And that is the exact moment her respect for you dies. Not because she's cruel, not because she enjoys seeing you weak, but because a woman cannot admire a man who won't stand up for his own soul. A woman needs to feel a man's strength, not the strength to dominate, not the strength to control, but the strength to remain aligned with who he truly is. The strength to say nope when something violates his boundaries. The strength to walk away when his dignity is on the line. The strength to choose self-respect over fear of losing her. You think you're showing love, but what she sees is self-abandonment, and nothing kills respect faster than watching a man shrink to keep someone he values. A man who betrays himself cannot be trusted to protect her. A man who fears her disappointment cannot lead. A man who chooses peace over truth loses both. Before we continue deeper into this, like the video, subscribe with notifications on, and drop the empowering phrase in the comments. Respect begins with me. Thank you for being here. Now let's begin. Most men don't lose a woman's respect because of a single dramatic mistake. They lose it through a slow, gradual erosion of their own identity. It happens so subtly that you don't even realize you're doing it. You start bending your truth just a little. You start apologizing for things you didn't actually do wrong. You start accepting behavior you once swore you'd never tolerate. And every time you do, you think you're being understanding, accommodating, loving. But in her eyes, something entirely different is happening. She's watching you compromise pieces of yourself that should never be compromised. She's watching your standards soften. She's watching your boundaries dissolve. She's watching you trade your authenticity for closeness. It starts small. You stop voicing your concerns because you don't want to trigger an argument. You defer to her decisions because it's easier that way. You silence your discomfort to avoid being seen as difficult. You let disrespect slide because you hope it will fix itself. And what she feels, deep in her instincts, is that you're becoming a man who values her approval more than he values his own truth. She sees the moment you shift from grounded to uncertain, from self-led to relationship-led, from firm to fearful. And here's the part that stings. You didn't do these things because you're weak. You did them because you cared. But care without boundaries becomes self-sacrifice, and self-sacrifice without self-respect becomes emotional submission. She doesn't lose respect for you because you're kind. She doesn't lose respect because you're loving. She loses respect because you stopped respecting yourself first. And once she senses that shift, even once, she can never unsee it. That's the silent beginning of the end. Not of the relationship, but of the way she sees you. Women are emotionally intuitive in a way men often underestimate. They feel changes in energy long before they see them in behavior. They can sense softness turning into weakness, patience turning into fear, and affection turning into dependence. The moment you stop standing on your truth, she feels it. Not in your words, but in the way your presence shifts. You could say all the right things. You could smile, laugh, act normal, but she feels what's underneath. The hesitation, the insecurity, the quiet fear of upsetting her. She notices when your "sure" becomes "if that's okay with you." She notices when your firm boundary turns into a suggestion. She notices when your confidence becomes carefulness, when you start moving around her instead of beside her. She feels the moment you begin negotiating with yourself just to maintain her comfort. And that's the moment respect begins to slip. Not because she wants to see you fail, because a woman is wired to trust a man who trusts himself. When you stop owning your voice, she stops feeling safe with it. When you stop leading with certainty, she stops leaning into your presence. When you start overthinking her reactions, she starts underestimating your strength. You don't have to explain that your standards have dropped. She feels it in your energy. You don't have to admit that you're afraid to lose her. She sees it in your silence. You don't have to say you're walking on eggshells. She hears it in your tone. Women notice everything you think you're hiding. And once she senses uncertainty in your spirit, the unspoken shift begins. She stops seeing you as the man she admired and starts seeing you as the man she can influence, rewrite, bend. Respect dies the moment she recognizes that your fear of losing her is stronger than your commitment to yourself. Attraction doesn't die because you weren't enough. It dies because you gave too much of yourself away. Overinvestment is the silent killer of respect, and most men walk right into it without realizing they're doing anything wrong. You think giving more effort will bring her closer. You think being overly available will make her feel secure. You think constant affection will prove your value. But in reality, every ounce of energy you pour into her without balance lowers your perceived value in her eyes. Here's the truth few men understand. People don't respect what's too easy to access. They respect what's consistent but self-contained. When you overinvest, you text first every time. You plan everything. You give reassurance on command. You sacrifice your needs to satisfy hers. You rearrange your life to make her comfortable. You try to fix problems she creates. And the more you give without reciprocation, the more she subconsciously starts to feel, this man needs me more than I need him. The moment she senses that imbalance, when your desire for closeness exceeds her desire for you, polarities shift. Attraction fades. Respect collapses. She stops feeling drawn to you and starts feeling responsible for your happiness. And no woman wants to carry that weight. Overinvestment turns you into the emotional pursuer, and pursuit without balance becomes pressure. It makes her feel chased, not chosen. It makes her feel overwhelmed, not admired. A woman respects a man whose world doesn't shrink around her. She respects a man who loves deeply but lives fully. She respects a man who gives effort but not at the cost of himself. When you invest more into her than you invest into your purpose, your growth, your mission, she stops seeing you as the strong, centered man she was drawn to and starts seeing you as a man who revolves around her. And no woman respects a man who orbits her more than he orbits his own life. Nothing destroys a woman's respect faster than watching a man betray himself. And the worst part, most men don't even realize when they're doing it. Self-betrayal isn't always loud. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like nodding when you disagree. Sometimes it looks like laughing off something that genuinely bothered you. Sometimes it looks like letting a boundary slide just this once because you don't want to upset her. Every time you silence your truth, every time you override your instincts, every time you choose comfort over integrity, you chip away at the foundation of who you are. And she feels every crack. A woman can forgive mistakes. She can forgive flaws. She can even forgive emotional distance. But what she cannot forgive, what she cannot respect, is a man who abandons himself to keep her. Because when she sees that, she suddenly realizes something terrifying. If you won't protect your own soul, how can she trust you to protect hers? Self-betrayal makes you unpredictable, not in a dangerous way, but in an unstable way. You become a man who bends depending on her mood, a man who caves depending on her tone, a man who shifts depending on her approval. And when she senses that, she starts testing you without even realizing she's doing it, not to hurt you, but because she needs to know if the man standing in front of her has a backbone. And when you fail those tests, when you cave, when you fold, when you choose her comfort over your own truth, something in her shuts off. She stops seeing you as a leader. She stops seeing you as grounded. She stops seeing you as someone who can hold emotional weight. Self-betrayal isn't just the moment you lose her respect. It's the moment you lose the respect of yourself. And once that happens, rebuilding the dynamic becomes 10 times harder. But the good news is, the moment you return to yourself is the moment she begins to look at you differently again. A woman doesn't always test a man because she wants to challenge him. She tests him because she needs to feel the strength of his foundation. She needs to know that the man standing across from her is rooted, solid, and self-led. She needs to know he won't crumble the moment tension appears. And here's the part most men don't understand. These tests aren't planned, they're instinctive. She tests you in the small moments. When she disagrees with you to see if you fold. When she sets a boundary to see if you respect it. When she pulls back to see if you'll chase. When she picks a small fight to see if you can stay grounded. When she pushes emotionally to see if you push back with calmness or collapse into chaos. She's not looking for perfection. She's looking for stability. She's looking for authenticity. She's looking for a man whose emotions don't get hijacked by hers. When a woman feels your certainty, she relaxes. When she feels your confidence, she softens. When she feels your boundaries, she respects them. But the moment she senses weakness, the moment she sees you overreact, over-explain, over-chase, the moment you adapt your entire identity to keep her pleased, another crack forms in her respect. Because here's the truth. A woman doesn't want a man she can control emotionally. She wants a man whose presence is strong enough to steady the both of you. If you stay grounded during her storm, you pass the test. If you lose yourself trying to calm the storm, you fail it. Most men fail not because they're bad men, but because they fear losing her more than they fear losing themselves. And that fear shows. It shows in your tone. It shows in your patience. It shows in your willingness to abandon your standards at the slightest push. She tests because she wants to know, can I trust you to stay you, even when things get difficult? The moment the answer becomes no, her respect begins slipping through your fingers. Losing a woman's respect rarely happens all at once. It's almost never one moment, one argument, one mistake. No, it's a slow spiral, a gradual decline that begins with one tiny self-betrayal, then another, then another. And before you even realize what's happening, you've created a version of yourself she doesn't recognize and no longer respects. It always starts with something small, letting a boundary slide just this once. Apologizing when you weren't wrong, trying too hard to keep her from being upset, explaining yourself over and over to avoid conflict. And each time you do it, the dynamic shifts just a little. She puts in less effort, you put in more. She becomes more distant, you become more anxious. She stops initiating, you start over-initiating. She withdraws, you chase. What began as one small compromise becomes your new identity. A man who bends, a man who pleases, a man who fears loss more than he values self-respect. And here's the painful part. Once a woman sees you in this new light, she can't unsee it. The more you try to fix things through over-effort, the worse it becomes. The more you try to regain her affection through reassurance, the less she feels it. The more you pursue her emotionally, the faster her attraction drains. Because respect doesn't fade randomly. It fades in direct proportion to how much of yourself you abandon. She stops valuing your time because you always give it. She stops valuing your voice because you never stand behind it. She stops valuing your presence because you never pull it away. She stops valuing you because you don't value yourself anymore. This spiral is the death of masculine polarity, and it never stops on its own. But here's the hope. The moment you break the pattern, the entire dynamic can reset. Respect can return, attraction can revive, the polarity can flip back in your favor. But it all begins with one thing. You must become the man she cannot pull out of alignment. The spiral doesn't end with her, it ends with you. Respect returns the moment you reclaim the one thing you lost along the way, yourself. And this reversal doesn't require yelling, ultimatums, or emotional theatrics. In fact, it's the silence of your shift that hits her the hardest. It starts the moment you stop explaining yourself. You stop justifying your boundaries. You stop apologizing for existing. You stop over-investing where effort isn't reciprocated. You stop chasing someone who doesn't meet you halfway. Your tone changes, not harsher, but steadier. Your presence changes, not colder, but calmer. Your decisions change, not impulsive, but intentional. You become a man guided by principle rather than emotion, and she feels the shift instantly. Not because you told her, but because your energy no longer bends around hers. Suddenly, you're not searching for her validation. You're not afraid of losing her. You're not walking on eggshells. You're not molding yourself to fit her comfort. Your life expands beyond her again. Your purpose returns to center stage. Your confidence becomes self-sourced. And this is where the polarity flips. She becomes the one trying harder. She becomes the one seeking your attention. She becomes the one sensing your distance. She becomes the one evaluating her own behavior. Because for the first time in a long time, she sees you again. The real you, the man who stands on something. The man who knows who he is, the man she respected from the beginning. And here's the powerful truth. A woman cannot respect a man who betrays himself. But she can't help respecting a man who returns to himself. The dynamic reverses the second you choose self-respect over attachment. That's the moment she feels the shift. That's the moment she wakes up. That's the moment she starts re-evaluating everything she took for granted. You don't regain her respect by demanding it. You regain it by embodying the man you were meant to be all along. When you finally return to yourself, your standards, your boundaries, your mission, something powerful happens. You become a man she has to respect, whether she wants to or not. Not because you demanded it, not because you argued for it, not because you tried to prove your worth, but because your presence now carries a weight it didn't before. You're no longer moved by her moods. You're no longer shaken by her silence. You're no longer softened by the fear of losing her. You've stepped into a version of yourself that is guided by inner authority, not external approval. And that shift is undeniable. You speak less, but your words matter more. You give less, but your presence feels stronger. You respond slower, but with far more intention. You stand firmer, but with a calm that commands attention. She notices the difference immediately. She feels it in the way you look at her, steady, not seeking. She feels it in the way you make decisions, direct, not hesitant. She feels it in the way you hold yourself, centered, not reactive. And here's the part that reawakens her attraction. Women don't respect a man who bends, but they deeply respect a man who stands. She begins adjusting her tone with you. She becomes more thoughtful with her words. She starts putting effort into the connection again. She stops taking your presence for granted because this new version of you doesn't tolerate disrespect. Not through anger, but through silence. Not through punishment, but through boundaries. Not through control, but through self-command. You've become a man who moves with purpose, not emotion. A man who chooses himself first, not selfishly, but wisely. A man who knows that keeping his self-respect is more important than keeping any relationship. And here's the truth she never expected. Respect is drawn to strength. And you finally stepped into yours. This is the version of you she can admire. This is the version of you she can trust. This is the version of you she genuinely wants to follow, because when a man chooses integrity over approval, he becomes the man she was hoping he'd be all along. Respect isn't something you ask for. Respect isn't something you beg for. Respect isn't something you negotiate. Respect is something you command through your presence, your discipline, your self-respect, and your refusal to betray who you are for anyone. And when a man finally understands that, he becomes unstoppable. You've reached the place where your validation comes from within, where your standards aren't flexible, where your boundaries are immovable, where your purpose stands taller than your fear of losing anyone. This is where true masculine power is born, not in dominance, not in aggression, but in alignment, in the ability to remain the same grounded, disciplined, self-led man, no matter who stays or who leaves. Because here's the truth she and the world must learn. A woman can only respect a man who respects himself first. And the moment you started choosing your truth over her comfort, your dignity over her approval, and your purpose over her reactions, you became a man she can't dismiss, a man she can't manipulate, a man she can't ignore, a man she must respect. You didn't rise by controlling her. You rose by controlling yourself. And that's the foundation of every Stoic soldier walking this earth. If this message hit you deeply, make sure you like the video, drop a comment below, and subscribe with notifications on to join the ranks of the Stoic soldiers. Thank you for watching. Thank you for striving toward the strongest version of yourself. And thank you for choosing self-respect over everything else. Your evolution has already begun. And the man you're becoming, he commands respect without saying a word.